Passed significant bipartisan comprehensive transportation legislation that provides new long-term, sustainable, and dedicated funding sources that will keep pace with Virginia's economic growth. Transportation and mobility are crucial to the growth of Northern Virginia's technology economy and the long-term economic health of the Commonwealth. Given you and your opponents' different perspectives on the transportation package, do you anticipate proposing any changes to the transportation package in the next General Assembly session and/or in its implementation? What additional steps would you take as governor to improve Virginia's transportation infrastructure?
Well, we have a lot of work to do on transportation, and it's a stark contrast in the race. It is as clear-cut as it could be. As soon as the governor came out with his plan, I endorsed it, I supported it. I called the leadership, the Democrat, called Dick Saslaw and David Toscano. I spoke to both caucuses, made individual calls. I said this was too important for Virginia to pass up an opportunity to move forward on transportation. Dorothy and I are stuck every day trying to go see our kids play a ball game in the afternoon. You can't get the goods to Dulles Airport. We've got to unlock the port. Several years, the big Panama Canal is going to open up and those big tankers are going to come somewhere. We've got to get them from the port out to the commerce of America. That's what I talk about. We've got to do work on 58, 64, 66. We have the American Legion Bridge, which most of us use every single day. They say 19 years, that could potentially have to be shut down, structurally obsolete. These are huge challenges for us. As governor, I got to compete against 200 nations around the world in 49 states. I got to convince them to come to Virginia. If you want to be in cybersecurity, let's get here to Northern Virginia. Let's work with our great education institutions, but they will not come if you're stuck in traffic. So it is a clear difference. I can't imagine. In 2017, we would have forfeited a 4-to-1 match, 4 federal, 1 state, because we would not have the dollar in our construction account. That, to me, is fiscally irresponsible. So I need to implement the transportation bill. I'm going to work with all the transportation experts. I've met with so many folks, and Bob Chase has been in my ear every single day, as all that other different folks, as it relates to transportation. I am for passenger rail. I am for metro. I am for anything that we can do to get cars off the road and make it easier. So I want to first and foremost do smart projects. I'm not going to do any political projects. For me as governor, the transportation funding has to go 2 areas. 1, does it ease congestion? And 2, is there an economic development component to it? If you meet those 2 things, then I'm going to be interested. If it doesn't, then we don't have enough resources to do what we need to do. And we need to give local control over these projects so that they have an understanding and they can tell us what we need to do. But it will be done in a collaborative way, bringing the best experts in. But I view this transportation as the beginning of our process, Sudhakar, what we need to do. We have huge projects going forward that we need to work on. I'd love to see passenger rail go from Lynchburg to Roanoke. If you're in Hampton Roads today, which many of our military assets are there, and you need to come up to Washington to the Pentagon to a meeting, you have to catch a train at 4:50 a.m. That means you're generally up about 3:15 in the morning. And it lumbers along for 4 or 5 hours. We need to fix that. We have huge challenges. I want to be known as the transportation governor. At the end of my term, we have some opportunity to spend some money now. We got to spend it smartly, and I promise you as governor, I will be an efficient steward of that money to make sure it is spent the most efficiently, and we are getting the best we can for our money because it's too important. Dorothy and I would like our 5 children to stay in Virginia. In order for them to stay here, we've got to have a transportation system where you're not stuck in traffic every single night.
Terry, good to see you. I'm glad to have you joining us. I want to talk about STEM. Give a couple facts and a question. Presently, there are 120,000 jobs available in the U.S. in computer science. However, we only produce 51,000 degrees. Governor McDonald, in 2011, great program with the Top Jobs Higher Education Reform legislation, which there's a goal of 100,000 degrees over the next 15 years. NVTC was a big champion of it. Presently, for Microsoft here in the U.S., we have 6,000 job openings, 3,400 require a computer science degree. We have a strong presence here in Northern Virginia with 1,000 employees in the whole greater Washington area. And according to Brookings Institute for this area, for Virginia, when you look at the jobs of the future, 27.1% will require a STEM degree. My question is, would you continue the work that Governor McDonald has started, and what additional steps would you take during your tenure to grow the pipeline of STEM students?
And Fred, that's a great question. I represented Pragmatics 2 days ago, and they gave me those exact statistics. The idea that we have so many jobs to fill in the IT sector, we're not graduating enough folks to do it. So that's got to be a top priority. But I do think this is important because it goes to education funding. And there is another key difference between the two of us running this race. My opponent mentioned that he put out a tax plan. Well, listen, his tax plan called for a tax cut, which would take about $1.4 billion out of our economy. Resoundingly criticized by Lieutenant Governor Bowling, many of the editorial boards. Folks, we'd all love to give you a tax cut, but you have to pay for things that you advocate for. If you just say, I'm going to give you a tax cut and $1.4 billion, and you don't say how you're going to pay for it, I think that is fiscally irresponsible. If you're going to propose a tax cut, tell me how you're going to pay for it. But what we cannot do today, with the challenges that we're facing and the numbers that Fred just talked about, and the challenges the next governor's going to have with the defense drawdown, is we have got to build up an entire new, which is so important for NVTC and what Bobby and everyone has done. We have got to move away from some of the military spending and build alternative new sources of job activity. And that most of that would be in cybersecurity, nanolife, biolife sciences, human genome testing, all of these great, but they all require STEM education. So we need to get into the schools earlier. I talk about pre-K and early childhood development. We've got to get those minds cognitively, creatively thinking early on. But in those early years, we've got to have a pipeline, Fred, in Virginia, where we go from STEM education, then we get into the higher ed, where we're taking advanced tech, and then from advanced tech, we take them right into doing what we need to do with the universities and colleges, research, development, and commercializing, taking these businesses out to the market. That's the goal. So investment, I would invest more of those early years to make sure we're doing what we need to do, but we have challenges on education. When I talk about education, I don't ever view it as an expense. I always view it as an investment. But we have tens of thousands of our teachers today in Virginia who are over the age of 50 and are nearing retirement. If you take average Virginia pay to average teacher pay, do you know where we rank in America today? We're 50th out of 50 states. Virginia is one of the wealthiest states in the United States of America. We should never be 50th on anything. So we have got to make sure we're working with those pre-K through 12 early STEM courses, investing early on, and then making sure, and what I want to do with the community colleges, but we've cut community colleges funding. From 2008, it was $4,400 per student the Commonwealth provided. Today, we're down to $2,500. We're going the wrong way on investment. So I would invest more in STEM. I would continue what Governor McDonald has done, build upon that. But we've got to do a much better job of bringing business with the educators together. We've got to do a better job of going to get those jobs. We have got to provide money for our universities. So we turned down, Alan Merton has told me that his 16 years as president, I think only once was he able to, in a significant way, to match a federal grant on research at the local level because we didn't have the state funds. Can't do that. We've got to be able to compete on a global basis by making sure we're tying education, job development of those 21st century jobs, and that's what I focus on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question centers around attracting technology companies. So do you support the use of business incentives to attract technology companies looking to either relocate to Virginia or to expand their present operations in Virginia? And if so, what types of incentives and what are the circumstances around them?
I do. I've consistently said that. And I think it's another obviously big difference between the two of us in this race. My opponent has come out and said he doesn't believe that we should be giving incentives to lure businesses to Virginia. Resoundingly criticized by Lieutenant Governor Bowling and others, and Governor McDonald, who have used that incentive money to create tens of millions of dollars of businesses in Virginia. We're competing on a global basis. We have assets that many other states do not have. Beautiful landscape, low taxes here, we've got the ocean, we've got mountains, we have everything here. We have great higher ed facilities, we have some of the best in the country, which lures businesses here. But it goes beyond that because competition. I talk about cybersecurity. We need to be the leader in that. And as I stand here today, I think everybody's aware that Maryland is working at warp speed to make Maryland the key, the world leader in cybersecurity. Now, I know Governor O'Malley and Senator Barbara McAuliffe are working very hard, but as governor, we're not going to let that happen. We need to lure those businesses here. But in order to bring, when I talk cyber warriors from Silicon Valley, It goes to my point, we have to offer incentives, we have to be competitive, it has to make economic sense. In most of these deals, you have clawback provisions and all, so it's got to make economic sense. But we've got to invest to build those futures of the 21st century, and I talk about it every single day. And it's important. You're not going to lure these cyber warriors and these businesses from around the world whom we want to bring to Virginia when we are putting walls up around Virginia. We have got to stop this attack on women. Women are 50% of the workforce of the United States of America. We got to get off of this social ideological agenda and this not wanted sign. We've got to stop the attack on gay Virginians. We have to be open and welcoming to everyone. We've got to work hard, we've got to fight hard. Incentives clearly is part of the package that you have to do. We have great assets, we're next to the federal government. The Pentagon is very close to us. This is where a lot of businesses want to be. And you look at the Hampton Roads region, they're doing spectacular work on modeling and simulation. We can build those areas. And I've always encouraged Bobby, it's not just about Northern Virginia, but you have been real leaders, this Technology Council. We need your expertise to be helping all the different communities in Virginia, working with the Hampton Roads region. We have a huge issue, what you call the rural horseshoe. You go from the northern neck to south side to southwest and then up through the valley. It's a quarter of our population, 2.1 million people. Today, 25% of the students are not graduating from high school in the rural horseshoe. If the rural horseshoe were its own state of 2.1 million people, on bachelor's degrees, we'd rank 50th out of 50 states. We'd be tied with Arkansas. As governor, I have to focus on these rural communities who really would need my help to bring manufacturing in. They need help, but it's hard to convince a CEO to bring an advanced manufacturing facility when 25% of the students aren't getting out of high school. You can help me do that. We are a Commonwealth. We've got to do this. All of us working together, the whole works better than the parts, and that's what I would focus on as governor.
Okay, there seems to be a growing appetite in Richmond for comprehensive tax reform at the state level. Do you support the concept of tax reform generally? And if so, do you specifically support the taxation of services?
Let me say this. We have balanced budgets, which is very important for us here to do. I want to continue the stewardship that we have shown under Governors Warner, Governors Kane, and Governor McDonald to make sure that our budgets are balanced and we're doing what we need to do to continue and foster economic growth. I've proposed, and I've said to the local communities, we ought to look at 3 different taxes because some of them are somewhat regressive to growing businesses in Virginia. First, you have the professional license fee, which you have to pay, and it's hard in many communities because you have to pay a tax on a new business in many parts of the state that even if you have no income yet, if you're a startup. I just don't think that's helpful to a startup business. You could, in fact, we talked about it with one owner right here. Until a company gets profitable, why are we taxing them? It's a disincentive for us in Virginia to bring startups and lure startups to Virginia. I think it's important. So I've said to communities, you ought to look at it. I want it to be tax revenue neutral, but we ought to look at that. We ought to be fostering startups, and we shouldn't be taxing companies if they don't have any profit yet, because as someone who has been in many different businesses, those first couple of years are always tough. I think I speak for everybody in the audience. I talk about the inventory tax we have. A specific community on a certain day in a county would pick a day where they charge you for your inventory. And you wonder why you see all these big car truck trailers moving cars out on a certain day. They go out that day and they may bring them back the next day. That's not really what we should be doing. And then there's the tool tax, manufacturer tool tax. Someone in manufacturing, you want our manufacturers and others who are buying the machinery and tool tax, you want them getting the most state-of-the-art equipment because you want them to compete on a global basis. So you want them to have the most advanced equipment. But you pay more taxes by doing that. So what I've said as it relates to the taxes, let's take a look at these. I want them to be tax revenue neutral. Each county can look at it different, but we ought to at least have the discussion and put the discussion on the table. I think everybody generally agrees, and Governor McDonald, Lieutenant Governor Bowling, we have a very low tax rate. Let's keep that where it's at, but if we could sort of change some of at the local level, which would incentivize more startups and more businesses, I clearly would look at that. I do not agree, as I say with my opponent who says, I want to give you tax stuff that's not going to pay for it. I can't afford any money to be coming out of education and public safety today. You can't, because it's a key driver for economic development and luring businesses here. So the tax system I say we have here today, we leave it the way it is. I think we ought to look at the local level. Let's not be adding new taxes on services and other things. Let's not be looking at that. But at a local level, if we can do things that spur economic growth and new startup businesses, I certainly would look at that. We ought to have a discussion on everything. JLARC came out with a study. There are many tax incentives that have been given to businesses, and some of these were not sunsetted so that they've gone on and on. Well, guess what? They're not creating the jobs they were supposed to originally or no longer doing it. We ought to look at those. And if they're not doing what their original purpose, we should end it. And I take that money and I invest it in education. Because when I got a great education system, I can recruit a business here, which creates more economic activity, which gets that great cycle going to make us the best in the country for doing business.
Terry, Virginia was the first state to have a cabinet level position with having a Secretary of Technology. And with each governor, the Secretary of Technology, it's been a little bit different on how that role has been. How would you see the role of Secretary of Technology, and what would you expect, and what type of Secretary of Technology would be the goals and objectives for that Secretary?
Well, I would obviously continue along the lines we've had with the Secretary of Technology. I want to make sure that the Secretary of Technology has the resources, because technology is the future. We are competing against Silicon Valley. We're competing against Massachusetts. We're competing against North Carolina. And what is going to diversify our economy more than anything else is going to be IT. And we are the leaders here in Northern Virginia. And I look forward to taking it to the next level. I've met with a lot of startup folks. I've met with a lot of incubators. The one thing they continually say to me is, Terry, we've got to get some more here, because we want to have a fraternity of folks together who are investing together. We need to get more investment here. Many of the companies here, startups, as you know, go to Silicon Valley because that's where a majority of the investment capital is today. I would really focus as governors trying to bring capital here, doing what we need to do to encourage businesses to grow here, to move here, and this would be obviously a very top concern of mine, that what I would do. We've got to lure through technology the best professors and scientists. It's not helpful, to be honest with you, when the Attorney General sues a University of Virginia professor because he doesn't believe that humans contribute to climate change. Whether you believe in climate change or not is not the issue. The issue is scientists, professors that every university president wants to lure to their facility, they have options. They can go anywhere in the world. They're not going to come to the one state where your Attorney General is suing to get their work product. It's just not something that happens with scientists. I think everybody in the room agrees with that. So as it relates to specifically to technology, I view the NVTC as sort of what would be the ground zero of where we need to begin to build out through the entire Commonwealth. But I've got to get more money to help the research and development. We've got to do a better job of commercializing some of the great research that we have. I was at George Mason the other day at Prince William. They have 2 scientists that are doing spectacular work on nanoscience. Several weeks ago, I was down at the Massey Center down at VCU. The work that they are doing today on this human genome sequencing to determine cancers and to get them early is beyond belief. But they have centers of excellence around the United States of America, somewhere around 30 of them. We don't have a center of excellence for cancer research in Virginia. We don't. Why? Because we don't do enough state investment to get the designation of a center of excellence. Now, if we're going to bring in the best professors and scientists to help us on cancer research, which is obviously healthcare is a growing area, we got to have a center of excellence. So as governor, I'm going to deal, another area besides IT is healthcare to grow, and I'm going to make sure we have an investment. We need a center of excellence in Virginia for cancer, because that's a growing area. So I'm going to put a lot of time and emphasis on that and work with the General Assembly to make sure we're funding it to show that we invest today, it'll be a spectacular return on our investment down the road.
So Terry, again, continuing the conversation around new company growth, over the past several years, NVTC has actively promoted a comprehensive grow your own strategy for new company formation to position Virginia as a leader in next generation tech company and innovation, as well as a top destination for entrepreneurs, early stage investors, researchers, and innovators, as you just referenced. So continuing along that line, what will you do as governor to ensure that we remain competitive as a top destination, particularly for entrepreneurs and early stage capital to support our growth?
Oh, and you hit it right on. It's early stage capital. Companies got to make decisions. They need to grow. They all need capital to do that. So we've got to be competitive in providing the capital that we need. And I know we have some folks here from CIT, and I know they've done a great job, that early stage gap funds that they do. We've got the Mach 37, the Cybersecurity Accelerator, great programs. So I need to figure out, and it's working with the NVTC and others throughout the Commonwealth, because every part of the Commonwealth is a little bit different in what they need. I've spent a lot of time in Hampton Roads. We've got to open up that port. But clearly in Northern Virginia, you are our best prospects for growing our economy and diversifying our economy and moving away from, obviously, we're still going to be the #1 on DOD expenditures. Virginia's still going to be #1, but the denominator is going to be smaller. And that's the challenge we're going to face. Most people will tell you they think that sequestration is going to get voted late September to go into next year. Well, if that happens already and many of the folks in this room who I've talked to about this and I see, have already had to make cuts in their businesses. They've already been cut back. I think for some of the companies, they were able to get some of the low-hanging fruit. I think next year with sequestration, if it does go forward, you're going to begin to have to cut limbs off of trees. It's going to be a dramatic impact. So how do you deal with that? How do we help you diversify? How do you help us bring new businesses in? How do you help the business, not only bring new businesses in, but how do we help the small businesses that exist here today? And that is early stage, helping them with money, but it's also working with the universities and colleges to make sure that the research that they have, we can take that to market, that we can commercialize it. And it's something I would spend, George Washington, I toured their facility out of Ashburn, the work they're doing with nanotechnology. So we have all the pieces here. As governor, I've consistently said, I want business to be closer aligned with the colleges and universities. As governor, I want to meet once a quarter with every college and university president. I want to sit in a room with all of us eyeballing each other, find out, because some of these colleges and universities, we need to get together on some of the bidding for the federal government work. It can't be one-off. We cannot operate in silos. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 or 4, but I want everybody in the room, let's have a good, honest discussion. How do you grow? And I'll do that once a month or once a quarter. Either way, if I have to do it once a month, I've told the community college presidents who never meet with the governor, I guess. I'll definitely meet with them because they are our workforce development team for the future. 3 out of 5 of our students in higher ed today go to a community college. I need to be investing in that. So I'll meet with the community colleges either every month or every quarter, but I want to sit in that room and say, what do you need? And we bring businesses in. So if there's a business, as Fred talked about, 170,000 IT jobs out there, what do you need from the community colleges? What do you need on their courses? How do we change our courses? We've got to match our education with the jobs of the future. They've got to work together. We can't wait till our students get out of school. We know a lot of folks who get out of school today. A lot of debt, no job. So let's start that earlier. And it's investment, capital, early stage, working, bringing the universities, colleges, community colleges, investing earlier in education, starting at the pre-K level all the way up. It's a great topic. I'm sorry. We could go on for a while about that.
Terry, we'll let you continue because this question sort of will let you continue in the same way. But as you mentioned, the Pentagon, there are hundreds of federal contractor companies all in the area, literally thousands of related businesses. The economic vitality of the region and the Commonwealth is dependent on funding from the federal government. And the recent defense cuts, the current sequester,
Yes.
and the BRAC actions signal a significant economic downturn. So what would you do specifically to make sure that Virginia weathers the impending federal cuts?
Well, in a lot of it, Sudhakar, what I've mentioned is the decisions that we make early on transportation. The next governor obviously is going to have a huge play in that, on the transportation, how we spend that money. I've got to help set the table to make sure that we can diversify our economy. Obviously, I talk about what we need to do in education. I'll be very vocal on this topic. We have big challenges I talked about on education that I need to deal with. On healthcare, there's a significant difference between the two of us on healthcare. My opponent is not for the Medicaid expansion. I'm for the Medicaid expansion. I'm for it for a lot of reasons. Number one, first of all, healthcare is one of the fastest growing job creators in the entire country, as well as it is here in Virginia. But healthcare is very important. But let's just take the Medicaid expansion for a second. It will cover next year 400,000 Virginians with life-saving care. It's paid 100% for 3 years by the federal government, 90% every year thereafter. If you look at all the studies, whether you support health care or not, it doesn't matter. It's the law of the land. As governor, I got to deal with the cards that are in front of me. So by expanding the Medicaid expansion, I would cover 400,000 Virginians. We would bring, according to the Richmond Times Dispatch, over the next 7 years, We would bring $21 billion of our money back into Virginia. It would roll through our economy. It is projected to create 30 to 33,000 new jobs. And I know some of the folks here are on hospital boards. Everyone who serves on a hospital board will tell you today that if we do not accept the Medicaid expansion, hospitals will close in Virginia, or they will incur tens of millions of dollars because the reimbursement rates and everything are changing as of January. So that is a huge difference. But obviously healthcare is another great area that we can grow and diversify. Healthcare, IT, working with all these issues that I just spoke about, I think is important. Once again, you can't put walls up around Virginia. We have to make us the most inviting place to come. See, I gave you a little back.
Terry, in your opening remarks, you mentioned workforce programs. What would you do when it comes to workforce programs to meet the business needs of today, particularly in each region of the Commonwealth?
Yeah, and as I said earlier, Fred, each region has very specific needs. Northern Virginia, very unique, IT obviously driven, Department of Defense, federal government outlays. I think we all know the numbers, 33, 34% of the GDP in Northern Virginia directly related to federal government outlays. My opponent says that any jobs created from federal government expenditures are not good jobs. I differ with that. In Hampton Roads, and many of you probably are in, have some federal government business. In Hampton Roads region, it's 50%. So every community is different. Workforce development, that's why I'm spending so much time in the community colleges. I'm proud to say I'll be the first candidate or governor to have gone to all 23. I have 19 done. I'm slowly making my way through. But I've got to help the community colleges, because when I lure a business to come to Virginia, the first place they go to find their workers would be at the local community college system. Now, we have a community college within an hour's drive of every Virginia resident. The average credit somewhere around $105, $110, so it's a great way for our children who are graduating to move into the community college to get the skills we need. But we've got to, Fred, better align businesses. And Bob Temple, I don't know if he's here, but Northern Virginia Community College does a great job. I love all the community colleges, but what's done at Nova at the community college is taken to a different level. I think probably because Bob had been at CIT, but they bring on a regular basis the businesses in to sit around a conference table with the educators to say, how do we fix workforce development? I have heard from everybody as I've traveled throughout the Commonwealth, and I've done, as you know, thousands of events the last several years. I've been in every nook and cranny. I've spent hours in living rooms and kitchens getting great ideas, filling up my notepads. But I've heard from most of the employers that workforce development as it presently exists is not effective. So that's got to be my first challenge. Do we run it through the community colleges? Maybe, I don't know. I want to have that discussion. We've got to do a better job of aligning those basic skills and jobs of the future with what we need to do, what our employers need in the future. But I have to be thinking not only for the employees that are here, but in 10 years, what are those businesses we're going to want to lure to Virginia? And we got to start thinking on our course loads today, starting early. And we have some great schools that are working on this. We've got to do better with earlier on with our STEM courses in order to do that. We've got to do a better job, I say, with our veterans who are coming home. We spend thousands of dollars training our folks, our military personnel who go overseas and who fight for our country. We ought to do a better job of certification, so they're getting great skills over there. When they come back, we shouldn't force them to go have to get a degree, to get a certificate to go into the workforce when we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the federal government training veterans. So I think that with the veterans, we've got a great opportunity. I think NVTC is actually working on a project like that, a program like that. So, I'm very much in what we do with the military, and Jordan, I have a son at the Naval Academy, so we're very attuned to the needs of our military. But I am very concerned as it relates to the naval base down in Hampton Roads in Norfolk. Big issues because of traffic. They are gridlocked. We have the Tide, which is in Norfolk, which today we need to extend it from the naval base out to Virginia Beach. There are things we have to help the quality of life as it relates to our military assets in Virginia in order to bring more military assets here, because Hampton Roads is absolutely gridlocked. And we got to make sure we're growing. We're the best place for military. We got to continue to do that.